AfroTales Podcast is a part of the Connected Podcast Network.
Ahoy, my friends. Welcome aboard the AfroTales Podcast. I'm your storyteller, Malinda. Join me as we explore the tales that grew from the people of indigenous and African descent in the Americas and the Caribbean.
After, come and see me, chef, who will impart upon you a recipe for the story you have just heard.
So with no further ado, let us set sail on this new age of exploration.
The Devil's Dulcimer.
Now, in some parts of the country, there are places where people have lived for well on 100 years without ever seeing the outside world. They're just off to themselves in hollers and hills and backwoods. The people in this story that I'm going to tell you are just like that. Most of them ain't seen anyone their whole lives but their kinfolk and their nearby neighbors. There's two things you need to know about these people in this story. One is that most of them are poor, don't have nothing, ain't likely to ever see anything either. The other thing you need to know is that they're superstitious. There was an old road that ran the outside of their settlement. Folks called it the Lone Bone Road. And that Lone Bone Road ran past two cemeteries. The first cemetery was called just that, the first cemetery. And the second cemetery, well, that's just what they called it, the second cemetery. Nobody went nowhere near either of those cemeteries unless they had to make an unexpected visit. Now, folks in those parts say, and I don't know one way or the other, that if you're on that Lone Bone Road, those cemetery gates get a swinging, well, it meant the dead were walking on that Lone Bone Road. It meant that something bad was bound to happen. I told you that these folks were po folk, but that isn't quite true. There was one among them that did all right, and that was the master fiddler. Whenever folks needed someone to play for them at a birthday, a wedding, or what have you, they'd send for the master fiddler. They'd pay him what they could, and the master fiddler always lived a bit better than most. Because if there was one thing po folk need, it's music and a good time. And that's just what the master fiddler gave them. Music and a good time. The master fiddler was so important that every 10 years they'd hold a contest to choose a new master fiddler. At the time of this story, it had come time for such a contest. Time to choose a new master fiddler. Now, there was a girl named Nell who lived in this settlement. But Nell didn't play no fiddle. She played a dulcimer. And no one and nothing could play a dulcimer better than Nell. She was just that good. Nell wanted to win that fiddling contest. She wanted to win it. She wanted to win it more than anything else. Because if she did win it, it would mean that she'd never be po again. Nell was po. But if she was a master fiddler, she would have enough to get by. But Nell didn't have herself much of a dulcimer. It wasn't more than an old 2x4 with some wire running across it. And it wouldn't hold no kind of a tune. She was going to need something a whole lot better if she was going to have any chance at that contest. So Nell started out looking for a new Dulcimer, but nobody could tell her how to come by one. Seemed like most folks, if they had anything at all, it was a fiddle. And if they had a Dulcimer, well, it wasn't much better than her own. Finally, she went to an old wise woman in the settlement, and Nell told her how she wanted to be in that fiddling contest, but how she needed a Dulcimer. This wise woman told Nell that she'd have to think on it. But after a while, she told Nell that it could be that she did know how she could come by a Dulcimer. She told Nell how folks hadn't always lived in these parts. At one time, a long time ago, back so far that she could barely remember it, there had been another settlement. Folks had lived there, most of them anyway, till some strange kind of sickness came. No one knew how it come or where it come from, but it took most folk. Got so bad, so many of them were dying, that finally most folks just up and left. They came to this new settlement. Now, if I remember rightly, she said, there wasn't one fella who stayed behind. He'll tell it he made a fight at my Dulcimer. I can't say what come of him, and by now, well, he's rightly be an old man. But if there's anyone who helped you, I reckon he's it. Then the old woman told Nell that if she was really strong about this, if she was really strong-minded about it, she could tell her how to come to that old settlement. She said, first, let me think now. First, you get on that long bone road. You walk past the first cemetery, past that second cemetery, and you keep on walking till you walk the sundown now here. You keep on walking till you come to the end of the long bone road, and that's where you find that old settlement. Well, the next day, Nell gathered up what little she had, because she figured she wasn't going to get a Dulcimer worth anything for nothing. When she had everything together, she set off down that long bone road. She walked past the first cemetery, past that second cemetery, and she kept on walking till she walked that sundown and came at last to the end of the long bone road and got to that first settlement. The houses were old and abandoned. Moss and weeds covered the windows, and there was a strange smell about the place. It was quiet, so very quiet. Nell almost turned back, but she wanted to win that fiddling contest so bad that she went on. Nell went to the first house and she knocked. No answer. She went to the second house and knocked. No answer there. She went to each house in turn, but there was no answer. Finally, Nell came to a cabin just at the very end of the long bone road. There was something very strange about this cabin. It made Nell's skin want to crawl. Again, she wanted to turn back, but she wanted to win that contest even more. She stepped up to that cabin door and knocked. "Come in." Slowly, Nell opened the door and went in. She expected to find an old man just this side of death's door. But when Nell got inside, she saw it wasn't an old man at all. It was a young man. A mighty good-looking one, too. Nell was right pleased by this. She started right in, told him how it was she needed a dulcimer. And she showed him what she brought to give him if he'd make her one. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at Nell. "Your fine things ain't enough. Give me that ring from off your finger, and I'll make you that dulcimer." Well, Nell, she didn't think once and she didn't think twice. She wanted to win the contest, so she gave him that ring. "Your ring isn't enough. Give me that petticoat that you're wearing, and I'll make you that dulcimer." Again, Nell didn't think once and she didn't think twice about it. Now, she got out of that petticoat of hers and gave it to him. "Your petticoat isn't enough. Give me the head of the one you love best, and I'll make you the dulcimer." This time, Nell did think once, and she did think twice. But what she figured was that she had this fella licked. Nell didn't have no kinfolk, leastways none that were alive. And there was no one that she loved. Nell told him that if he'd give her that dulcimer first, he could have the head of the one she loved best. He made her that dulcimer. He didn't tell her how he made it or what he made it from. He just brought it to her. And before Nell left, he told her again, "Now, remember what you promised." Nell took that dulcimer and headed back down that Lone Bone Road. But as she was going, she kept getting a strange feeling. She kept thinking that she was hearing voices in all those houses that had been empty before. Nell looked back over her shoulder, and standing there on the step of the cabin she had just left was an old man. Nell hurried on, but still she kept hearing these voices. She looked back a second time, and it wasn't an old man standing there. It was something that looked like it had just crawled up out of a grave. Nell didn't look back over her shoulder a third time. She clutched that dulcimer as tight as she could and ran. She ran as quick as she could back down that Lone Bone Road. Nell ran far enough and fast enough till finally she had come back to her own settlement. But as she passed that second cemetery gate got to swinging. Nell didn't pay no mind. She just kept on till she reached her own place. The next day, folks started to gather for the fiddling contest. Folks came from miles around, from the backwoods and the hollers and the places not even heard till of Sumac Creek and Hungry Holler, Broken Back and River Reel. There was every type of fiddle you can think of. Black, shiny fiddles, new fiddles, old fiddles, large ones, small ones. If it had any strings at all, it was there for the fiddling contest. Folks were eating and laughing, singing and spitting tobacco, and anything else that they had a mind to, just waiting for the contest to begin. Well, finally all the fiddlers in the contest began to gather. Nell put her own token in with the rest of them. When some of them seen how it was a girl entering the contest, and with a Dulcimer at that, they just kind of snickered out of one side of their face. Like everyone knows no Dulcimer can keep up with no fiddle, no kind of way. They just weren't built for it. But seeing how she was a girl and it couldn't do no harm, they let her enter. It'd be good for who, anyway? There were 3 rounds in the fiddling contest. In the first round, you had to play something sad, and those fiddles played sad. Each one in turn some of the saddest music you ever did hear, until finally it was Nell's turn. Nell picked up her Dulcimer, but before she played it, she said to it, "Play sad, my Dulcimer. Play a sad, sad song for my listeners' ears." Nell's Dulcimer played sad. Babies started wailing. Grown men broke down and started sobbing. Folks got to crying who never cried a day in their lives. It was miserable. Well, it was generally conceded that Nell won the first round. For the second round, they had to play something fancy, and those fiddles played fancy. There were fiddlers playing fiddles behind their backs, fiddlers playing fiddles with one leg in the air, fiddlers playing with the other leg in the air, and it was fancy. But then Nell's turn. And Nell picked up her Dulcimer and said to it, "Play fancy, play fancy, play fancy, my Dulcimer, play a fancy song for my listeners' ears." Her Dulcimer played fancy. Folks just looked and could hardly believe their eyes at what they saw. It was pure amazing. Nell won the second round. For the third round, you had to play something fast. This time the fiddlers figured that they had Nell beat because, like everyone knows, a Dulcimer can't keep up with no fiddle when it comes to playing fast. They were going to prove it too. They resigned up their bows, tightened up their strings, and got down to it. Each in turn playing just as fast and as furious as could. Fiddlers from every settlement, Summit Creek, Hungry Hollow, Sway, Rivers, Rail, Broken Back, and on down the line till it was Nell's turn. Then it was just as quiet as can be. Play fast. Play fast, my Dulcimer. Play as fast for me and for my listeners' ears. That Dulcimer played fast. Folks were clapping their hands, stomping their feet, and spinning around in their tracks trying to keep up with her. She was going so fast, Nell won the fiddling contest. She played on. Folks danced and sang, stopping every now and then to drop a few coins at her feet. Nell didn't pay no mind to the time, so that it was well after sundown before she quit playing. and well on dark before she headed home. Now, Nell lived fairly close to that Longbone Road. When she got near to those cemeteries, she could hear those cemetery gates swinging. It sounded as if they were saying something. It sounded as if they were talking to her. When Nell heard them gates saying that, she started to run. And it kept feeling like something was snapping up out of the grass at her ankles. Nell clutched that Dulcimer as tight as she could and ran like all hell was after her. And maybe it was. She ran till she came to her own place. And as quick as she could, she locked up her gate and went into her cabin. She pulled the shutters and locked up all the doors. Then Nell sat down in her rocker and laughed. She hadn't heard no cemetery gates. Those gates hadn't said nothing to her. She'd won the contest. She was the master fiddler, and she wasn't ever going to be hungry again. She was never going to be poor. Well, Nell must have fallen asleep in that rocker, because suddenly she woke up. She thought she heard something at her front gate. Who would be visiting the master fiddler this time of night? A voice called from way off there by the front gate. So soft, she almost didn't hear it. I've come for the head of the one you love best. Nell didn't move. She just sat there, so scared she just shook, so afraid she could hardly speak. Once again the voice called. I've come for the head of the one you love best. I ain't got no head to give you. There's no one that I love. I ain't got nothing to give you. The voice called again, a little closer this time, a little nearer, from just in the middle of the yard. Play sad, play sad, play sad for my listeners' ears. Nell's fingers picked themselves up. She couldn't stop them, and they began playing. So sad that Nell began to cry. Again, the voice called, a little closer this time, a little nearer, from just at the front door of her porch stair. Play fancy, play fancy, play fancy, my Dulcimer. Play a fancy song for my listeners' ears. Again, Nell's fingers picked themselves up and began playing. They played and played, and she saw them do things she never thought possible. Still the voice called, even closer, even nearer, from just there on the other side of her cabin door. Play fast, play fast, play fast, my Dulcimer. Play fast for my listeners' ears. Nell's fingers played fast. They played fast. They played faster. They played faster still until the cabin door opened. The next day, some folks came looking for the master fiddler. and they found Nell. She was still sitting there in the rocker with her Dulcimer in her lap. But her fingers were worn off from playing so fast. And on her neck, there was no head. Well, they buried Nell. But they didn't bury her in the first cemetery or in the second cemetery. They buried her off to herself and buried her Dulcimer with her. Folks say, if you're in those parts and near that Lone Bone Road, when the wind is blowing in a certain way, you'll hear that Dulcimer. It plays fast. It plays faster. And it plays faster still. Wow, that was an awesome story coming out of Talk That Talk by Linda Goss and Marian Barnes. I wonder if Marian Barnes is related to me in any way. I have a lot of Barnes in my family. The story is retold by, me and Janice in Harrington. If you're looking for this particular location, I would say somewhere between Mississippi and Alabama, maybe Georgia. I placed it in Mississippi for the podcast. And if you live somewhere where there's a Lone Bone Road and 2 cemeteries, please contact me. Send me pictures, whatever, to AfroTalesCast@gmail.com or AfroTalesCast anywhere. Tag me, whatever, at AfroTalesCast. You'll find me. I would love to see a cemetery 1 or the first cemetery and the second cemetery literally down the street of Lone Bone Road. That would be awesome. I'm not going there. I'm not going to check out the settlements. I'm not doing anything like that. I'm not trying to find the Dulcimer creator. It's not going to happen. But I love this story, right? It's a girl, teenager, older, the time period. I understand. If we're talking, say this story came out in the 1800s. A girl out on her own is about 15, 16 years old. That's normal. She's looked at as pretty much an adult at that point. If we're talking 1900s, she's 19, 20, 21. Okay, so just so y'all can understand the ages, depending on when the story came about. She's a strong girl. As she said in the story, she has no family. She's an orphan, basically. And she's doing it on her own. She has a homespun Dulcimer, and she is creating music with it, and she's good. And she looks to be better, to be the best. And she's going up against fiddlers. And if you've ever seen a fiddler, you know fiddlers are crazy skillful. A good fiddler, that is. But when you see dulcimers played, they're played on the lap. Okay, they're not being held up, which is why it's harder to get fast and do all that stuff with it. So she's sitting down playing this instrument, and she's outdoing the fiddlers. That's awesome, right? And I just think about it like, as skillful as you are, people are always going to try to look down on you, especially if you're a woman. They're going to be like, oh, well, she's a woman. Okay, let's see. And then she just outdoes them. And you shouldn't have to prove yourself. It shouldn't be that, oh, she's a girl. No, she's a person here trying to win a fiddling competition. Period. Not that she's a girl, but We know how society is. Her only mistake and her biggest mistake was going to the extreme to get what she wanted. She went all the way and made a deal with the devil. When the ring didn't work, when the petticoat didn't work, she wanted a head of the person you love. Sir, ma'am, that is a no. That is a no. That is a hell no. Okay? Don't do it. It's not worth it. All right? Don't make that deal that's going to cost you your life. It's not worth the success. This really isn't. Okay? That's all I have to say about that. We can see that how people do that in real life. We see it with musicians all the time. And maybe that's what it is. This is the story of musicians going too far, making the deal with the devil. But you can also see in other parts of life, in everyday life. People make deals with the wrong people and end up in bad places. Okay? So let's take that message from this story. And now you can go see Chef. He has a wonderful recipe for you coming out of Mississippi. And until we meet again, this is the final story for October and the spooky season. So we're back to more regular stories, okay? Not so spooky. Maybe spiritual, but the good spiritual, right? Anyway, go see Chef, get your recipe, and until we meet again, as always, have a blessed day.
Welcome, my friends, to the Galley. I am your chef, and today we have a wonderful meal inspired by the story you have just heard. Today, we will be creating Catfish Francese. Now, what will you need for this recipe? Half a cup plus 1 tablespoon of all-purpose flour, divided. 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt, divided. Half a teaspoon freshly ground black pepper. 2 large eggs. 2 tablespoons of water. A 1/4 cup of pumice oil or canola, your preference. 4 catfish fillets. 2 large lemon, sliced thin into thin rounds with seeds removed. 1 cup of chicken stock. Half a cup of dry white wine, that is dry white wine. Juice half a large lemon. 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter at room temperature. 2 tablespoons of coarsely chopped fresh parsley leaves. Now, how do we put this together? Easy. First, place half a cup of the flour, 1 teaspoon of the salt, and the pepper in a wide, shallow bowl and whisk to combine. Then, whisk the eggs and water together in a separate wide, shallow bowl. Heat the oil in a 10-inch or larger skillet over medium-high heat until shimmering. Dredge the cutlets in the flour, fully coated both sides and shaking off any excess. Coat the catfish in the egg mixture. Let any excess drip off and add to the skillet. Cook until lightly browned, around 3 minutes per side should do. Transfer the catfish to a paper towel lined plate. Repeat with any remaining catfish if needed.
Pour off and discard the oil in the skillet. Add the lemon slices to the skillet and cook until fragrant. About 30 seconds should do. Add the wine, the broth, and the lemon juice, and the remaining half teaspoon of salt. Simmer until slightly reduced. About 5 minutes should do. Meanwhile, use your fingers to rub the remaining 1 tablespoon of flour into the butter. Use your fingers to rub the remaining 1 tablespoon of flour into the butter in a small bowl to make a paste. Add the paste to the sauce and whisk. Add the paste to the sauce and whisk constantly until melted. Return the catfish to the skillet and cook until the sauce is thickened and catfish is heated through. 3 to 4 minutes. Garnish with the parsley before serving. Serve with sauteed vegetables and lemon risotto. And that is it, my friends. Now, go. Do what you do. Make this recipe yours. And until I have another wonderful recipe for you, remember the girl and her Dulcimer. And be careful what you ask for. So, until next time, my friends, as always, enjoy.
Thank you, my friends, for coming on this voyage. Thanks to Art by Chalet for the logo, episode, and shirt designs. You can get t-shirts and other items on tpublic.com. You can contact me on all socials at AfroTalesCast. That's AfroTalesCast. And email me at AfroTalesCast@gmail.com. You may also become a benefactor by simply sharing with any and everyone, giving a thumbs up, a 5-star rating and review in your podcast app of choice, or simply donating on Patreon or Ko-fi.com. That's ko-fi.com. So until we meet again, may your winds be fair and your seas follow.